Right, thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Hold on. Sorry, I'll give you a heads up. Okay, good to go.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Risk and Assurance Committee meeting of the 24th of August. I think you've been here early and obviously in extenuating circumstances of lockdown 4. We're doing it by way of Zoom. Having spent 6 hours continuous on a meeting yesterday, I think we need to be slightly forgiving of each other if we fail to, but do try and remember to unmute yourself when you want to speak, because I do want to encourage you to have your voice heard over the matters that we've got in front of us this morning. We obviously just a few minutes late, so apologies for that, but as far as I can work out, we have a quorum. But just a couple of apologies. Alex, I think, is a pretty definite apology. Darren, I don't know whether you've joined us yet, but we haven't seen Darren, so perhaps I could suggest we accept an apology from Darren for at least lateness. And
no, I'm absolutely here, Bruce.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, Darren, you snuck in there at the end. Well done, mate. So
I'm here as well.
Oh, Alex, you're there as well. Oh, brilliant. Okay. So there are no apologies, but what I would just note, I've had a couple of indications. Leslie, you need to shoot through at 10:30, correct?
Yes,
and
I do.
You've got a commitment at 11 for a period of time, albeit that we might be getting somewhere near the end by that point. So if we could just note those, I will leave it at that. I've had no indication of any public forum. You will have noted on your diligent boards that there was the addition in the last 24 hours of a late major item, which relates to the terms of reference of the independent review of electronic access. This relates clearly, as we all well know, to the events of the last fortnight and the value for us all to have a review of arrangements. The document did take a bit of work to produce, so it has come to us late, but I would ask your leave that we include that on the basis that it's important that we progress the matters that the terms of reference include. So look, I will firstly move from the chair that the major late item, terms of reference, independent review and electronic access be accepted. Do I have a seconder, please? You'll need to say your name. Thank you, Darren. Yeah, thank you, Ross. I'll take Darren. He was in first hand I saw. So look, the motion is there. Is there any discussion? There being none, I'll put the motion that we include this. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. Hey, can I encourage you, please, again, from experience of yesterday, if you want to vote for something or indeed vote against it, can you please make certain your voice is heard? Otherwise, you and I have done this one, I think, Leslie, and I'm pretty certain everybody else is probably voting aye. So please have a good voice. There are no other changes to the agenda that I'm aware of that we have. When it comes to public excluded, I've had a couple of corrections as to the reasons why we are in public excluded for a couple of matters, and I'll raise those when we get to that item. Or sorry, the motion. Not in my view large issues, but it's worthwhile just making certain we've got that right. We have in front of us the full agenda. Are there any matters of interest or declarations of interest that people need to make? Great, there being none, can we please then move to the minutes of our last meeting on the 21st of June at 8:30 when we were all in one room together. I'd like to move from the chair that we receive and resolve that the minutes of the Risk and Assurance Committee be confirmed. Do I have a seconder, please? Thanks, Ross. Thank you, Bex. I just thought Ross was raising an eyebrow.
Yeah, I was just trying to do the unmute.
Thank you for that, Bex. Right, are there any matters of accuracy or correction that people noted in these minutes that we should be aware of? as I want to say, it looked like the meeting that I was in. It was a very good meeting, actually. So I appreciate that. If there are no matters, let's move to the motion that we confirm these. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Those against? It's carried. Appreciate that. Groovy. If we could then move on to the next item, please, which is the project management office status report. And Erin, I see you're on the line. I think we go straight to you to introduce and give us a heads up, please.
Thank you, Bruce. So the first thing I just wanted to do today is advise you that Tess Brown will be taking us through today's project management office report. But this is going to be the last report that Tess will be taking us through at Risk and Assurance. She has been acting in the role of head of our project management office here since the end of last year. However, we've now appointed a permanent employee into that role, which is Lee Butcher. Lee is on the line today, so I just wanted to take that opportunity to introduce Lee. He's got a bit of quite a mix of background from both the public and the private sector, including quite a bit of time at Christchurch City Council, and is already known to some of our staff from those days. So yeah, just wanted to introduce Lee.
Morning, everybody.
Lee, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Great, welcome on board. As you say, a Christchurch City influence around the place. So I'm getting welcome anyway. It's nice to have you here, and look, we wish you well. It's a really important area, as you well know, for any council. So appreciate having you on board.
Thank you very much.
We look forward to actually being able to meet you in person as well. I think as all the elected members and colleagues would as well. Thanks, Erin.
Thank you, and I'll now hand over to Tess to take us through the body of the report.
Morning, everybody.
Hiya, Tess.
How are you?
Over here.
Good. Okay, so in terms of the report, in the last reporting period, we've been making good progress on a number of projects. In terms of this morning, Bruce, would you like me to touch on the projects that have been identified as still rising to the top from an escalation perspective?
Yes, please. That would be very helpful.
Okay, so I'll start with the museum, and it continues to be shown as a project, an escalated project, because of the work that we're currently doing in the reimagining phase in terms of resolving the scope and then understanding budget and just acknowledging that we've got a wide stakeholder group that we're working with. We are making very good progress in the reimagining phase, and the team is established and is working well with the museum governance group. So whilst we're showing it as a red project, we are making significant progress through this reimagining phase. In terms of the Branksholme project, that has got some scoping issues from a cost perspective. Just the nature of the industry that we're working in at the moment, with cost escalations having come through from when the budgets were established probably 18 months ago or 2 years ago. So we're currently in a review process with that project from a cost perspective, and the PCG is meeting next week to understand where the numbers are sitting and what that means from a project perspective. And then Three Waters, it's a program of work that again continues to have challenges simply because of the status of the industry with the constrained market that we've got in Southland, and the amount of work that regional councils are wanting to complete as well as city council. So we have kind of the perfect storm in terms of competition for resourcing, a number of dependencies because of that resourcing, which is creating, which has the potential to create some delivery issues for us that we're watching closely. So those are the projects that are currently flagged as as projects that we're working on. In terms of city centre streets, obviously that's on hold. But just before the lockdown, we had mobilised on site on Don Street, and we were due to mobilise on Esk Street, but obviously that has gone on hold until we understand when we start to move out of the alert levels, what implication that has had as well from a programme perspective.
Thank you for that. That's good to have those headlights. Look, Rangi is chair of
Sorry,
infrastructure.
Bruce, can I just
Oh,
make
Erin.
two highlighted points just out of what Tess has said. One of them just being about what Tess spoke to around the Branksholme job. I just want to give everybody a piece of early heads up just around that job. You'll see that we've brought it out as an individual item within our project reporting now. That's because we do have some concerns around that project, so we think it needs its own particular attention. The concerns around the project are that, as Tess mentioned, there's about $11.5 million in the long-term plan for that project, a mix of council money and Three Waters stimulus money. However, the budget that was put together for it, to be fair, was probably a reasonably basic budget at the time that the long-term plan was put together. And so we're seeing really significant changes to that original budget, both from the perspective of it didn't include things like internal time, it didn't include things like contingency. It was based on a standard, I guess, traditional method of delivering the project via open trenching, whereas we're going to have to be doing a significant amount of underground directional drilling on the project. And we've also had to take a different route to the one imagined. That means that the cost of that project is escalating to the point where we haven't finalised the full budget for it, but we are expecting it to be in the vicinity of $18 million or more, up from that $11.5 million. So that's a significant jump on that project. So I just wanted to give everybody an early awareness of that. We haven't updated the full budget in the reports yet because I didn't want to put a figure in that we didn't have confidence in yet. But we are working to close out what that full budget will be for that project at a more detailed level. I do want to talk to one other thing, but just if there's any questions on that.
Look, what I'd like to do is I'd be very happy to hear your other point. I'd then like, Rangi, your chair infrastructure, just to whether there's any broad thing there, but I want to remind us we're a risk committee. So I'm more interested in actually the general and the high level issues of actually how do we pursue our capital program, which is what I'd like the committee to focus on. So Erin, very happy to hear your other point and then invite Rangi to speak and then we'll open it up.
Thank you. The other one was just as Tess alluded to, we were due to start work on streetscapes this week. Just want to make sure that everybody is clear that, you know, we may have some concerns around keeping to that very ambitious program, particularly through to the May next year farmers opening. Now, obviously, the ICL building is also not progressing at the moment. And once we do come down the alert levels, we'll, as Tess mentioned, need to work through how our two programs are still meshing together. But just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that we were already running a tight program around that one, and the risk has just increased now.
Just out of interest, you get back to work, what, at level 2 or level 3?
It can be at level 3, but there's obviously increased health and safety requirements that have to be taken into account.
Right.
And we are just working through that at the moment, just around the national guidance as to whether it needs to be a nationally significant project or not to get to work under level 3.
Yeah, appreciate that. Rangi, is anything from your committee's work today that would be relevant for our broader consideration of risk?
I'm pleased to hear that variance. Like, I'm not pleased with the number, but that was one of my questions with the Branksholme pipes. And I'll take this time to say that, you know, this is the black art of Three Waters that we have to work with, and I've got no idea how a new government entity would come even close to dealing with these variances and be as nimble as a council can be. Now, the other thing I just want to make sure of is with streetscapes is that everything, even though I'm on the CCGG committee, that everything is in line between what City Block wants for their tenancies that open out onto the street, and with our designers, that everything is in sync. And we're not going to find later down the track that there may be there may be issues or compromises, especially since we're starting with a fresh pallet. So that's one of my concerns, and I see that at a risk at this stage until this council can be satisfied.
Thank you for that, Rangi. The black art of three waters, I agree. Folk, can I open it up for questions, please? The stress we hear about trying to think about the total CapEx program rather than necessarily discussing an individual project unless it's giving us a sense of those higher risks. Can I open it up for discussion or questions for Tess or Erin, or indeed Rangi, if that's wanted? Yes, Alex. Alex, I think you're on mute. I can't hear you. Sorry.
Here we go. Is that better?
Brilliant. Can hear you well.
So I guess this question has probably been asked previously, but with both the Streetscapes project and Cargill Central Limited, with the COVID levels and obviously with the work program being shifted back weeks and weeks now, and if we continue to have to shift the program, what are the penalties going to be, or what have we got, I guess, built into the contracts that allows for a buffer, or is there anything that allows for a buffer of time there that, you know, given if the projects are continually shifted back, are we going to be able to meet that May deadline?
So Alex, we were already working to an incredibly tight program.
Yeah, that's absolutely
yeah. So I think what we've got to do is, once we can get on site and we can establish the programs that we're going to be working to with the other developments, then we'll be in a position to regroup and understand what that means from a time and a cost perspective. But I imagine there's probably 3 to 4 weeks before we'll be in a position that we'll be able to come back with anything really solid in terms of being able to inform the group.
And I suppose just at a high level at this stage, and I can go into it more later on when we deal with the report on ICL, but obviously we had plans in progress last time around, having already been through this on the last occasion when we went into lockdown. So we've pulled out the program of work and the way that we proposed to work under level 3 on the last occasion, which we had approval for. ABL have already started working with MB and all the other associated entities to make sure they get that into place. And so we're doing what we can at the moment, but at this stage, obviously, until we see the end of it, it's pretty hard to put a firm figure on what, if any, impact it'll have.
And similarly, the Streetscapes is working with Downers as well in terms of putting plans in place to be able to work under level 3, but it is just that interface between the projects that we need to resolve.
And does the extension of time contracts, or the whole issue of rates under being prevented under lockdown 4, is that a potential again, either Andrew or Tess, with these contracts?
The contractors will be entitled to an extension of time claim or a variation under it depends on the particular construction contract. And I mean, I know under our contract they will be entitled to a variation because of the delay that they've incurred.
And similar for us, and obviously the contract's got a bit smarter. I don't know, testers might be a little bit more over this than ours were, but obviously ours being a pre-COVID contract, it really was sort of there, but very poorly worded. At this stage, I suppose we've managed to work with ABL to really avoid any of those issues up to date. Obviously, we're now getting closer to crunch time when it might start to have real impacts, and so we'll have to see how that plays out. But to date, we haven't had to go down the contractual argument path, and we'll hope to avoid that if we can, but obviously it depends on where we end up.
Great. Questions from members? No? So look, just to recap then, Tess and Erin, there's probably 4 biggies that sit on my mind here. One is we've just been discussing the alignment of projects generally under very tight time constraint as an issue. That's also closely related to COVID being an issue. The other thing that I've heard Erin and Tess is particularly around the Branksholme water main and Rangi's reference to black arts.
Sorry, Chair, I think we might have lost you for a moment.
Yeah,
Keep right on,
it
Bruce.
appears that our chair is. We might give him a minute to reconnect.
Yes, whilst we are waiting for that, were there any other questions? Your Worship.
Oops. Can you hear me all right?
We can.
Oh, very good. I wanted to speak to item 7. We had a bit of an accident with the equipment here.
We're not on that item yet, Your Worship,
Oh, good.
but it's still to come.
My apologies. I think I dipped out there. Did folk lose me? Because I lost you, folk. Sorry about that.
We did indeed.
I'm in the depths as I had to get geographically corrected by Claire yesterday, Western Southland, and the connection may not be the best at all I wanted. So my apologies for that. So look,
camera's freezing, Bruce.
What's that, sorry?
Your camera is freezing quite often.
Oh, is it? Oh dear. I'm afraid to say, as I've learned, I live in an area without broadband, so I'm dealing off mobile. So believe you me, it's chews through a fair bit. Hopefully, look, if it gets worse, can you just tell me, please? And it might be that we've got to find some alternate arrangement.
Just
Chair,
as
we
a
just
suggestion,
lost you
Bruce.
in the middle of the summary.
Wait a sec, sorry. So a suggestion from Darren, which is good, thank you.
Yep. To lessen the impact on your broadband, you can actually turn your camera off, so that'll reduce the chance of your audio buffering.
If people are happy not to see my face, which is quite okay. I'll do that. How's that? Rightio, we'll try that. Worst comes to worst, you need to see my face, give me a yell. Thank you for that advice, Darren. So look, if I can just go back to it, I was trying to think of those higher issues. Alignment, COVID, stimulus with our problems with our budgets. And obviously I'm noting that with the reimagining of the museum, with the rework around the Branksholm, it must raise an issue that our funding approach is changing. So I just wonder, there may be other risks, but they seem to be the biggies. And Erin, the other thing, sorry, that I've just noted from you is the impact of the general contracting market. Can I ask at that higher level, are there any strategies, other than staying close to your contractors that we've heard about, that you are thinking about implementing or considering at this stage?
Yes, so happy to talk through that. One of the things that we have established is there are some panels in place to help us with our professional services around project management, quantity surveying, things like that. In terms of the contracting market, we did some work when we were first setting up the project management office around whether or not we should be establishing a panel of contractors to undertake this work on our behalf. We have done that around our Three Waters panel, and that's a joint panel with Southland District Council. But across our broader projects, to be honest, they were so varied that we didn't see that the benefits of being able to establish a panel of that type. If we'd have had a very large roading program or Three Waters program, or all of our projects were quite similar property ones, we might have gone down that path. But because everything was so varied, we haven't used that as an option. To your point, though, we are working closely with the market around who's available, making sure that they're aware of the timings that the projects are coming to market and trying to generate as much interest in those as possible. The other thing that we've done is have a piece of work undertaken just around the market in the Lower South Island and what other projects are happening over the next 5 years and how our program links in with that work, so that we can see where there's gaps, peaks and troughs, and also where those particular constraints in the market will be. And also those, I guess, projects that allow us to potentially leverage off players that will have come down to the Lower South Island in the market to do other work that may be of assistance in terms of timing our projects to, fit in behind or before those projects.
Thank you. From a funding side, Michael, I'm not saying any of these potential increases are actually mandated, but our financial strategy, its impact.
Yeah, I just want to remind councillors at this point that it is a full program funding approach that we've taken, and just to bear in mind that we were pressed in relation to being able to deliver the full program as it stood, which was highlighted by the external auditors at the time. This actually points towards in favour of that view, and that we'll be watching that on a quarterly basis from a finance sense. At this point, I don't have any major concerns in relation to that. I will continue to monitor that on a quarterly basis. As say, actually, I'll be monitoring it on a monthly basis, but I'll present to council on a quarterly. But no concerns from my perspective at the moment.
Right. Thanks for that, Michael. Yes, Rangi?
So just moving forward with our LTP, quite a few years to our secondary water supply, which is in the same sort of league with Three Waters. The money we've got set aside for that, obviously there's another LTP in between that, but how far off the mark do we think we are? Or is it worth thinking about that now?
We're constantly moving the numbers, Councillor Pottinger, from that perspective, and we'll have that view in relation to the next LTP to reforecast that. Just also, I'd probably remind Council at this point that we have an extra buffer in relation to our policy around our debt cap. So that's something that may come under question, need to be reviewed at the next LTP, particularly in mind with any changes around what our water side brings us.
Thank you for that, Michael. Look, I'm just conscious of both my dipping out and back, and we probably are taking a lot of time over. It's a very key item. Are there any really urgent questions folk would like to raise, or could I move to the resolution, please? Thank you for that, Erin and Tessa. That has been a very valuable insight, and one which we will continue to monitor with interest. And obviously, we've got an item coming up which is really important. So can I move to the resolution, please, which is simply that we receive the report, the Project Management Office Status Report. I think in the sake of being online, I will probably just move this myself. Do I have a seconder, please? Need to shout your name if you're going to do it.
Yes, Ross.
Was that you, Nobby? Did I see the hand raised?
Yeah, Bruce, I am happy to second it. I had the hand up as an electronic way of just saying I wanted to comment a little bit about the topic that we just closed off, that's all.
All right, yeah. Well, look, we'll accept your seconding. So we're open for discussion on the motion. So can you go ahead, please, Nobby?
Yeah, just one quick thing that Rangi raised, which was he suggested that potential funding for Branksome, if it got over the figures that we're looking at, could be the money that we've got put aside for secondary water supply. Just from my end, a warning there. If we leave the secondary water supply too long, it will get under the water entity, and I don't think it'll be a priority for them to do it. If we can do it before we transfer across in 2024 or have some traction in the secondary water area, we're more likely to get it for the city than if we wait on a priority line in the South Island.
And just butting in there, I can't see the screen, sorry. Look, I didn't want to drag money out of Branksome, out of the secondary water supply. I just wanted to make us aware that maybe this variance could occur with that project. No way did I want to take any money out of that.
Thank you.
Thank you for both. Are there any other points people would like to make to the motion? There being none, I've moved the motion. Nobby seconded. Thank you, Nobby. That we resolve to receive the Project Office Status Report. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Those against?
Aye.
It's carried. Thank you very much. Right, we're moving to a verbal item, which is the working together. And Jeff, could I invite you to give us some words of wisdom, please? Jeff, are you with us? Are you on mute?
He does appear to be in the call, but he does appear to be on mute.
I can pick it up, Chair, if you like.
Yeah, why don't we'll start anyway, Lindsay. I can't see Jeff on my screen, to be honest, so I'm not certain what the story is.
Yeah, he's there on another page.
Maybe on page
Apologies,
2.
can you hear me now?
There he
I
is.
can hear you, Jeff.
Yes,
Yeah, well
you're
done.
there.
Apologies, look, I'm like you, Bruce, my internet connection's not flash. So if I freeze, Lindsay's going to share the report anyway. Just on the working together, a lot of this will now be based on the next phase, which will be subject to the Thompson report and its possible recommendations, which the council will have to give some consideration to. We started the 4 working groups back up. They were scheduled for last week, but as you're all aware, postponed because of lockdown. But there has been quite a bit of work done in terms of the working groups, and some progress are made around aspects in terms of support to the councillors. So first, there's been good progress around the support functions on the work that's being done on how agendas are created and support staff towards the council's committees, and also work done on the new policy for members' expenditure and allowances. And the Lagoina requests process has now been developed, where they are tracked in a much better way than which was raised in the original report in regard to the Auditor General. Councillors' professional development workshops have been underway. They are still programmed right through to the end of the year. And can I just thank councillors on the basis of their feedback at each of those workshops. We're taking note in consideration of some of the comments in regard to timing, etc. And we appreciate that feedback. It makes it easier for us to give some pointers to future workshops and presenters. There's a new template being developed for reporting, for preparing staff and their advice they give to councillors and committees, and that you'll start to see that roll out in September. And in terms of the future work, there's the other one that's in terms of the working groups, which I'll get Lindsay to cover, is regard to the LTP process and comms. Lindsay.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff and Chair. I've got a task of heading up the working group with the title of Strategic Projects Prioritisation, and I just want to give you a brief heads up on how that's tracking. You'll all know that the LTP process was a pretty successful one, contributed to by a significant commitment, not only by yourselves, but also by the team within the organisation. And to some extent, that work has overtaken the working group's task. That said, the working groups agreed that there would be value in capturing, collating, pulling out, if you like, the ICC's LTP process and embedding it in your systems and processes for future application. So to that end, an external resource has been engaged, Simon Markham, to take a wee bit of pressure off Rhiannon and collate all of the good things that have happened during the last cycle. He's running a best practice lens over it, and our expectation is that the outcome of that will go back to the working group. In fact, it was on the agenda for the cancelled working group meeting, and ultimately it'll find its way through with the outcome of the survey and the workshop for councillors reflecting on the LTP process to this committee and then to council probably won't close out that working group's task in September as hoped, probably pushed out to October now, I would say, Chair. And just on comms, remains a challenging area, of course. Council adopted a framework for its communications in May, and it's great now that we've got a strategic comms manager on task in the form of Lisa Knight, and her appointment has seen a bit of a lift in comms across the organisation, including an increase in regular media briefings on relevant topics. So that's a wrap, I think, on what the EAs are up to, Chair.
Thank you, thank you, Lindsay. That's really helpful. Are there any questions or points that members would like to make at this stage, please?
Are we up to item 7 yet?
Not quite, Sir Tim. We're still dealing with working together. So item 7 is the next one. I'll let you know. Make sure you've got your chance for say. Any other items in relationship to the verbal report from the EAs? So obviously the critical thing is, as you've hinted at, Jeff, is the need for Richard's report to be finalised and be brought to the committee. I had obviously been keen that we get that our way soon. Our problem being, of course, lockdown, and for a report which is substantive for us, it's a critical 6-month review. I was keen that we hold out, if that's the right word, to be able to meet in person to deal with that. And that was the nature of the short brief I put out at the end of last week. Of course, last night we've seen the extension of level 4 until at least the end of this week. So I will discuss this with Claire and try and work out what is the best way to bring it up. Maybe that we have to deal with this one by way of Zoom or electronically, which I think is less desirable, mainly because it is obviously a really critical point to be able to discuss. But at this stage, all I can say is that it's progressed well, but we need to find a way to bring it to us. We may have to seek your leave to do it electronically, which, as I've said, from my perspective, is less desirable than meeting in person. Right, with that, I just wonder if we don't have a formal motion, but I think it's important, please, that if from the chair I will move that we receive the verbal update of the 2 EAs. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Darren. Appreciate that. Any discussion on the motion? There being none, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Those against, it's carried. Thank you. Right, we will move to item 7, and Sir Tim, I'll certainly let you have a chance to have a say. But firstly, I'd like to invite. Actually, Jane, is it you that are introducing this, or Claire to speak first before I open it up to members?
I'm happy to, Bruce, with Claire's
Thank you, Jane. Appreciate that.
Whatever. Yep. Morning, everybody. It's a nice sunny day in Christchurch, and I think you've got good weather down there too. If I can just talk, these are a brief covering report and a 2-page terms of reference. If I can talk just briefly to the covering report and draw your attention to maybe 3 paragraphs under the background and context. Firstly, way back in your meeting on 27th of April, you passed a resolution that the Chief Executive take the necessary steps to support the Deputy Mayor in supporting the Mayor in representing the city. And that talked about, at the meeting, we talked a lot about the need to utilise electronic access to the Mayor's ICC email account way back then. And then if we fast forward a couple of paragraphs down to the 17th of August, just recently we got a media query from the ODT about the subject of access to the Mayor's emails and how the Chief Executive had knowledge of a statement the previous week. Now, Claire put out a media statement, and we could consider that the matter was dealt with. But we felt that it seems that there's a range of understanding and appreciation of how council correspondence is treated, and therefore thought we needed independent confirmation of what we're doing. So that's a thumbnail of the background. Before we get to the terms of reference, if I could just draw your attention to a recommendation that we appoint Robert Buchanan to do this work. There's a paragraph in the covering report about Robert's expertise in the area, and I think most of you will know him as he's done work for council before. Importantly, Robert's able to start immediately and have something to us by mid-September if council wish to pass that resolution. So maybe, shall I just keep going and go through the terms of reference, then take questions, Bruce? Or do you want to pause?
Yes, I think that would be useful, please. We took it that way, Jane.
Okay. So onto the terms of reference themselves. Look, the background and context is just a longer version of what's in the covering report. So I won't go through that, but I will draw your attention to the brief, which is the heart of what we're suggesting needs to be done. We talk about reviewing the arrangements for electronic communications, which were, excuse me, which go back to the discussion on April 27th. The key bits, I guess, are the 7 bullet points. The first 3 are the sort of big picture things. So going to the policy and reviewing the policy itself. It's called Electronic Access and Use Policy for staff and for non-staff. Then it's important to look at how that relates to the Legoima stuff and the Privacy Act requirements. But the third thing is equally important, just making sure that everybody who needs to has the same understanding of the systems and processes in place to do this stuff. So that's the big picture stuff. Then we go and focus the review into supporting the mayor through his ICC email account. So that takes us back to the deliberations that were held last April, the discussions that were held in the resolution that's on the books. And then we move on to looking at the special arrangements which were subsequently put in place, and again relating them back to our other statutory function requirements. Then looking at what we actually do and comparing that and contrasting it with practice in other mayoral offices, and then finally focusing on the email of the 10th of August. So I think that's all I need to say. There's 3 recommendations there that we're suggesting that this committee might like to adopt and put to council, but there is an opportunity to have a discussion and make any improvements or amendments that they wish to make to the terms of reference. And I think that's it for me.
I hope that's given folk. Admittedly, this is a major late item. So look, I'd like to suggest that we undertake this conversation with a couple of things in mind. This is about whether we undertake a review to clarify an issue. It's not to litigate the issue now. We've all spoken, not we, but there has been a number of discussions about this in the media, and that is where that lies. This is about whether the clarity of a review would help us And obviously the strong recommendation of the staff paper is that it would. So this is a debate about, do we undertake a review or not? And if we do, are the terms of reference reasonable that we will support? So firstly, given it's a major late item, I'd like to raise or ask members, do they want to raise issues particularly around the terms of reference? And then I will open up for more general discussion about whether or not we undertake the review. So the questions about the terms of reference at this stage.
Yes, well, I'd like to speak to that. Are we finally at item 7 now?
We are indeed, Sir Tim.
Oh, God. Yes, I know that it's the meeting of August 17th is where we got to last time, but and I think it does try and set out responsibilities and clear up lines of communication, but it doesn't give anyone the right to hack my emails. And I think it's an improper act and a misuse of email to go down that road. Neither Claire or her advisors should play any role in choosing who conducts the review. Claire is implicated as a party to the alleged improper use of an email, and the report downplays the fundamental lack of consent by me as to hacking the emails, and the report does not make any distinction between interception and misuse, misuse being a serious offence.
So Tim, can I just jump in there, please? I appreciate the sensitivity of this. We have a terms of reference, which is seeking clarity on what is our policy around electronic access. We are seeking to understand where the basis for support of yourself and others, and also the support, which is not uncommon for mayors, of managing the email account is reasonable. I think it's a big difference between that and what you're alluding to, and I would want to caution you about using words like hacking. We're talking about something which is about here for support and whether that has been done reasonably or not. Darren, I saw your hand up. Would you like to make a point, please?
Thanks, Bruce. Look, the point I was going to make, you've just touched on, it's not hacking. It's not hacking when people have legitimate legal access. It's in the policy. Hacking implies something illegal, which this wasn't. So I just wanted to point out it's not an appropriate term.
Thank you, Darren. And hence my understanding of the terms of reference, that they are around a review of the actual arrangements that were intended and what was actually put in place.
Yeah, Bruce.
Yeah, sure, Nobby.
Just a couple of things on the things mentioned by the Mayor and subsequently by Darren. Just to counsel that it's really a bit unwise for us to be stating our position on this. I mean, I've got a view that's very similar to Darren's, but it's important that we allow this process, if we go through this, to take its course and to not prejudge. There are opposing views on both sides of this debate, and I've been in the middle of that. And I just think that there is neutrality in this paper coming forward. It's forwarded by Jane, who's done a lot of independent work for working on working together. And I don't see any suggestion that Claire's over the top of this. In fact, she hasn't commented on this matter, which is great. And I'm certainly in favour of the terms of reference and certainly in favour of the recommended reviewer as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Nobby. Are there any other comments people would like to make?
Well, I think it would be foolish for this council to expose Claire to criticism by not treating her office or herself as an affected party. Being involved by being involved in the choice of who the review person is, she exposes her office to accusations of lack of impartiality.
So Tim, can I just remind you what Nobby has just said? The pen on this review has been held by Jane in her semi-independent view. I have also, as the chair of Risk and Assurance, been consulted over it, and indeed was approached as to who might be appropriate to be the reviewer. We are all in some way affected by this review, but the essence here is that Jane has brought a paper with recommendations for us as a committee to recommend to full council that they adopt. So it is a council review that is being suggested here, not Claire's review.
Bruce?
Yes.
Just as a follow on to what the Mayor said about Claire and her team potentially steering us in a direction that would suit her, that's not been my experience. As you will all be aware, I had a code of conduct last year that involved Robert Buchanan being the independent reviewer. And while the review didn't go in my favour, I found him to be extremely professional and open to a wide range of discussions about what had transpired. So I think he's an ideal person for it.
Thank you.
If you don't like the word hacking, and that's really come through media, what would you suggest as an alternative terminology?
So Tim, we have used, if we go to the terms of reference, the approach that was anticipated in the policy and what I think, if it's fair to say, Jane, was anticipated through the April meeting, which was electronic access and support to your email account. That's quite different to the use of the word hacking.
That's right. And I was at that April meeting, as everybody else was, and remember the discussion.
I think to
allay access.
Yeah, Bruce.
Yes.
Just to allay the Mayor's fears about this being a little bit of a setup, I guess, and certainly I would expect, and I think everybody else would, that Robert, when he does his review, if he's the person that we approve, will come down and interview the Mayor. He'll interview Claire, myself, other members of the Chairs group that were at the meeting. So there's plenty of opportunity to have your say and use words like hacking if that's the way you feel. But I think we should just step back a little bit and approve the terms of reference and decide whether we want Robert or somebody else.
Thanks, Nobby. Appreciate that.
Well, I'd like things noted in the minutes. And
sorry, Tim, what was that you wanted noted in the minutes?
My opposition to the resolution and the recommendations.
Thank you. We'll get to that point when we look at the resolutions. Any other comments folk would like to make at this point?
Yeah, I would, Bruce, coming back again. I'm sorry for hogging the space. I'd like to hear from the Mayor why he's opposed to this resolution, which really brings somebody independent in to have a look at it. He's made some media statements that he feels, I guess, quite violated by the intrusion of people into his email system. And I think it's only proper for us as a council to get some independent review of that we don't deal with internally, because that just creates more issues for us. And I'd like to know why the Mayor feels that he's in opposition to an independent person coming in who is of good standing and will take some time to review all the issues involved, including the issues that the Mayor may have.
Well, it doesn't deal with the issues I felt, and the having someone review your operation is I don't think the perception will be that this is really clean slate operation.
So with respect to your worship, I heard Jane read out the terms of reference, and the first one for me was the most important one. It talked about giving consideration to LEGIMA and the Privacy Act, which is what I guess is the backstop for you to say, I feel as though my personal email should not be subject to review by anybody internally. And you're quite right to have that position if that's what you want. So I think that's one of the terms of reference that the review will actually focus in on. And that's your opportunity to say what you need to say.
I think the approach, as you've outlined, Nobby, is both at the general, or rather Jane did, which makes sense in terms of why would we have electronic access, or rather what is the rules around it, and then how we implemented it through it. I've got Rangi, and then I think I've seen Lindsay's hand. So Rangi, you're first, and then Leslie.
Well, since we're engaging in a review, should we include the allegations of bullying, which have been done in the media, and that's a very strong allegation towards council members, which I've taken offence to, but I was quite okay to let that rest. But is this something that the independent reviewer would look into if he is going to be looking into that incident?
Jane, would you have a comment on that?
I think that's a completely different issue. And just taking you back to the points that Bruce highlighted, this is a high-level review, not a review of one incident. It looks at the big picture. It looks at whether we have done what we said we would do properly, and we all understand how the systems and processes work. Any allegations of bullying are nothing to do with this, in my view.
Thank you, Jane.
So just following on, would a councillor then do that under his own bat if he had an issue with that?
There are always options for councillors, Rangi, but I think that's relevant to this point, as Jane said. Lindsay, have you got a point to make or a question, please?
Well, thanks, Chair. It's an observation from somebody who has been on both sides of this debate in previous lives, and I want to make those observations about the terms of reference. In my view, they're solid and they're principled, and they're supported by an independent person of standing within the sector. They look at both policy and practice and the application of the policy and the practice. I think they'll serve the council's interest particularly well, and I can't fault them, and I commend the adoption by the committee.
Thank you, Lindsay. Leslie.
Thank you, Bruce. Lindsay's actually said a great deal of what I was going to say. I think that they are high level and very solid and well put together recommendations. And my comment on the suggested independent reviewer is that Robert Buchanan has impeccable references for the job. We would be hard put to find someone of his qualifications and independence if we were looking for other names. I'm very comfortable. I think they're neutral. It's a neutral and well put together suggested review, and there could be no one better than Robert to be an independent reviewer whom we can definitely accept would give everybody a very fair hearing and write an extremely carefully put together report. Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you. Thank you, Leslie. Appreciate your support. It feels like, unless there are any questions of clarifications or points to make, it's relevant that we move to the resolution. So if nobody...
Bruce, I have one.
Yes, sure.
Just a comment on what Rangi raised about the issue of claims in the media by the mayor of bullying. I guess the way to activate that is not through this terms of reference, but I guess both the mayor and any, on the flip side, any councillor that felt aggrieved by those statements could activate a code of conduct, which could then dovetail with Buchanan's visit. So I guess that's an avenue that's open to members if they feel that the mayor's comments were unwarranted, or open to the mayor himself if he felt he was being bullied.
I think your point's well made. I'd just like to keep this clear that we're dealing here with this terms of reference rather than making it broader. I think we've had, and we will test with a resolution, the level of support about the clarity of the terms of reference and its need. Could I move to the resolutions, please, which are obviously that we receive the report, which is the cover report. Thank you, Jane. And importantly, we recommend to Council that the terms of reference be adopted. I think we can remove with any amendments because nobody is proposing an amendment. That Robert Buchanan, as we've discussed, be appointed to undertake the review. We note, by the way, that he can start basically straight away, which is useful. And that we note the estimated cost is up to $10,000 plus GST, and that can be accommodated within existing budgets. Is there any, so look, from the chair, I will move this motion. Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you, Nobby. I had a few hands here. Thank you, but I heard your voice first, Nobby. Appreciate that. So is there any discussion on the motions? There being none.
Hey.
Sorry, Sir Tim.
I was just going to say I've had my say.
Thank you very much. And well, we'll check when we get to the voting, but I think you have had a request. I think you're going to request that your name be recorded in this vote. Can I please put all four motions as one set? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those against?
Aye.
Thank you, Sir Tim. I just want to confirm your vote is against the resolution. And if your statements are correct from earlier in discussion, you would like your name recorded in the minutes as having voted against this motion, correct?
Correct.
Thank you very much. We'll make that happen. Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate that discussion. It's an important one and one which I think will help us in the long run as we get through things. Can I move then to the procurement policy, please, under item 8? Michael, that's under your name, but maybe there are other people to speak on this who perhaps I don't know.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to introduce Nick Bridges, who's the Procurement Manager, new to ICC. So he'll be presenting this report, and Rhiannon Suter, who we all know, just because it's about consultation and engagement as well. So I'll hand over to those two.
Thank you, Nick and Rhiannon. We're in your lead or your hands, whichever way is most useful, please.
Good morning. My name's Nick Bridges. As Michael stated, I've been here about 9 weeks now. The concept behind the procurement policy and the procurement manual basically is to codify some of the good practices that already exist within council, like in infrastructure, but to also have a cohesive approach going forward, and perhaps most importantly, making the market very clearly aware of what our approach will be in terms of procurement and internet website on procurement, which is under development. I don't know if there's any specific questions. Sorry, I keep cutting out.
You do.
Yes.
I don't think
I'll turn my video off.
That'd be a good idea, Nick.
Would you like me to say that again?
Yes, please. That would be just that would be helpful.
Right. The aim of the procurement manual and policy is to basically codify some very good practices that currently exist in council, e.g. infrastructure, and also to align all the other activities under one procurement policy and manual going forward. We are also looking to have an intranet and internet website on procurement, which is currently under development. I can answer any specific questions.
Brilliant. So if I can just check for the benefit of the committee, this isn't, as you say, an attempt to codify. So we are trying through this policy to bring our approach together. Nick, I can't help but also think this does relate back to the previous discussion we had on capital expenditure and enabling Erin, Tessa and Co to have the relevant flexibility to meet today's market's conditions as well. Can I invite any comment folk would like to make, including Erin and Michael, as I think you have been probably involved and this is of interest to you. Michael.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to get Rhiannon to mention about the consultation engagement plans, because this is a draft that we're putting forward today, because we still need to go through our engagement internally and externally. So just, if I can hand over to Rhiannon just to discuss those matters.
Thanks, Michael. Kia ora, councillors. Yes, so really the key point is that, as Nick says, a lot of this procurement policy is about codifying existing and best practice so that the market is really clear on how council procures, and that supports the capital programme. It also includes an option to allow for social procurement. So many of you will be aware of social procurement and increasing interest in the community around how council as a significant purchaser of services might support the four wellbeings. This is a complex topic, both from a political perspective and then from an administrative perspective. And so hence the proposed engagement plan, which suggests holding a workshop with councillors ahead of bringing the policy back to risk and assurance before consultation, to give you the opportunity to discuss how the four wellbeings interact together when it comes to procurement. Council is obviously doing many $1 million of business, and delivery of the capital works program is core to the procurement policy. And it's really important that all of those factors of wellbeing are considered, and that you councillors have the opportunity to give some guidance as to where you want that issue to sit.
Thank you, Rhiannon. Michael, was there anything else you need to add?
No, I just wanted to support that view around the social procurement. It is new from our policy perspective, and it is something that will need further discussion as part of those workshop and consultation processes. Open to questions.
Oh, thank you. And I just wanted to check with Erin. As it said to me, this does have some relationship back to the capital procurement program. Is this driving in the right direction for you and the challenges that you and your team face?
Thank you, Chair. Look, yes, I've reviewed the draft procurement policy. I think that it still allows us quite a bit of flexibility in terms of being sensible in the way that we procure things, and providing the ability to, I guess, have a standardised, codified way of doing things as per the norm, but also to deviate from that from time to time through a particular approval process to allow us to your point, respond to particular market conditions. I just want to make a comment around what both Michael and Rhiannon have said around social procurement, and also around buying local, and the fact that we need to work through how we apply those particular pieces and make sure that we're still able to, I guess, get large chunks of work out to the market in a quick manner, as opposed to breaking them down into too many smaller chunks, which I guess is a little bit more beneficial from the local market and social procurement perspective. So we'll be working through in the next stages of this process, and to Rhiannon's point, we're wanting to involve elected members in that discussion on just making sure that we get the balance right between those social procurement, local market, value for money, and ability to deliver elements, but definitely happy with the direction of it.
Thank you. So that's really important. So I draw members' attentions again to the proposed engagement process, which clearly also essentially involves the development or affirmation of the approach, and how do we find that balance? And that's it's on page 25 of my diligent book. bottom of the page, there is a whole engagement process leading to the policy, developed policy being brought back to the committee on the 8th of December. Is there any questions or discussions folk would like to make at this point?
Just to one point, Bruce.
Yes, surely, Nobby.
On page 18, and it might not be the appropriate page anymore, it talks about variations or over $100,000. It's in a paragraph. I'll just read it out to you. I can find it quick enough. It starts off with the weightings will be not the same for each procurement. And so where it's over 100,000, a procurement plan must be developed by the business and approved by procurement. And I don't see any link between that and what goes forward, which is where general managers can generally approve a range of things, which is in the policy document going out for submission. And I just wonder what that approved by procurement means, or whether that sort of variation or that weighting that puts into a tender needs to be approved by a general manager.
Can I respond to that?
Yes, go Nick.
The idea of procurement's involvement normally is to ensure the plan is reasonably comprehensive and relevant to the size of the transaction or the risk being taken during the procurement process. We don't normally stop. What we normally do is just add or ask questions if we think something's missing or hasn't been considered. So the approval basically is to make sure there is a plan and to raise any issues that we're concerned about before we go to market.
Yeah, thanks for that, Nick. And just maybe a slight wording so that when we go out, people are aware what it means. It may need to read approved by the procurement manager.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other comments people would like to make at this stage? Right, I wonder if we could move then to the resolutions, please, which is firstly that we receive the report of Nick and Rhiannon, and secondly, we note the proposed engagement approach and that the consultant on draft policy will be brought back to us for adoption ahead of, will be brought back for adoption ahead of the consultation to September. Risk and assurance. Is it September or December? Sorry, can I just check there? It's September, is it?
Indeed it is, Mr. Robertson. They
Thank
need
you.
to come around quickly.
Pardon? Yes, it is. I must have misread my timing. Okay, so I'll go back to it. So that the proposed engagement, note that the proposed engagement approach and the draft policy will be brought back for adoption ahead of consultation to the next meeting in September. Again, for the sake of ease, I will move that motion or motions. Do I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that.
Thank you. I think it was you, Bex, if I went by the sound of the voice. Is there any discussion on the motion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Those against? It's carried. Appreciate that. Right. Continuous improvement. Peter.
Morning all. I'll take it as the continuous improvement update has been read. This was an update of improvements since the June Risk and Assurance Committee meeting. Happy to take any questions regarding that.
I wonder if you could just, before I open it up, Peter, just give us, by the way, can I say I appreciate the report. There may be one or two little changes I might recommend, but they're not large. Are you able to give us a sense of the weight, the seriousness of the outstanding items? Are you just dealing with the 16 open items as normal course of business, or do any of those have a particular weighting or concern that the committee should be aware of?
No, these are all minor changes to procedures that require updating. For example, the health service ones, the alcohol ones, one of them is just an update on the ILT boundary map to go onto city maps on the council website to get the definition, as in one side of the street is within the boundary, the other side's outside the boundary. So it's just getting that updated for our site. So they're reasonably minor updates that we're working through now.
Brilliant. No, thank you for that, Peter. And I just want to remind committee members that as part of our role about getting assurance over systems and processes, that's actually, dare I say it, the boundary thing is almost music to my ears. This is about keeping things tidy. And I appreciate that and the work you're doing. Are there any questions folk would like to raise for Peter? There aren't? What's the timeline on getting those open items closed?
We've just had access to a new software tool where we're managing the continuous improvements through a ProMap module. So we're uploading all the audit results and continuous improvements into the improvement module of ProMap. So this takes time, upskilling the team, but going forward, we should be able to start closing these off more regular each month.
Mm. And to put it in and I ask it carefully, but you've got the full cooperation of, internally of managers and what have you with these updates, the open items.
Yes, and with the ProMap module, we'll be able to assign an owner, and they'll get notifications when they have to review a process and that going forward.
Brilliant. Right, I sense this is a good information matter, unless there are any other questions. Oh, Michael, you've got a point, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Look, I just wanted to highlight to the councillors that we are, and Peter just mentioned that we are looking at trying to bring in a better tracking system to allow managers to give comments back and forward in relation to that, so we can bring high risk items through to this committee, and that will have details and comments straight from the managers that we'll be able to share from that purpose. So we're working through that, and we're hoping to have that in draft by the September meeting, but we'll be looking to have that finalised by the December risk and assurance.
Thank you. That would be helpful. I mean, I think if you just take a small hint from me, Michael and Peter, as to where I'm keen to go, I'm keen to see the movement through and any particular weighted or indicative matter that's serious, which is otherwise impeding just dealing with something. So that's great. If we could move then to the recommendation, please, which is that we note, and I guess receive the ICC Continuous Improvement Program update. I'll move that from the chair. Do I have a seconder, please? Yes, thank you very much, Ross. Appreciate that. Any discussion on the motion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those against? Those against? It's carried. Thank you. Item 10 is sensitive expenditure. And again, another really important information one, as indeed the previous one was. Jamie or Michael, is there any opening comment you want to make, or should we just go, will I just open it straight up to as having been received and open it up for committee members to make comment on?
Jamie, you go,
Jamie.
Michael. Okay.
I was just going to say,
yeah,
Jamie.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So just take the report as read. Just one thing we'd probably suggest the committee consider is the recommendation 2 gets expanded a wee bit. It currently says notes to expenditure, and I think the committee should consider changing that to note the expenditure and agree that it is appropriate.
Oh, in the resolution?
Yes.
Yes, got you. I think that's fair enough. I mean, that's the whole process here, is that it gives us a chance as a committee, as a risk committee, to gauge, are we acting in a way that we think is correct and that is appropriate. So I don't have any trouble with the suggestion that we add that to the resolution. So look, I open it to people like to raise questions about the schedule, about any of the matters that may or may not have caught your eye there, please. I think, by the way, there's a reasonable amount of information here and the way that it's developed a wee bit over the last couple of meetings, which I appreciate. But if are there any questions folk would like to raise? Right, seems like it's pretty clean. That's good. Can we please go to the resolutions then, which we have just added to, and I, as chair, rather than going through a full amendment process, I'm going to recommend that we just run with what Jamie suggested. So the recommendation is that we receive the report on sensitive expenditure, and that we note the expenditure and agree that it is appropriate, which I think is, as I've said, right. Okay, I'll move that motion, please. Do I have a seconder? You'll need to shout your name out.
Rangi.
Thank you, Rangi. Appreciate that. I presume there is no further discussion on the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much. Right, again, another one of those normal reports that we should get just to understand our broader issues. So, Michael, the quarterly financial report, or Patricia, or Jamie, I don't know who it's going to be, but it's always a good surprise.
Patricia, please.
Hi, Patricia.
Sorry. I'll introduce it, but Jamie can equally answer any questions. This was presented to the PPP committee on the 10th of August, but has been brought back here in case there's any to raise any issues of risk that or any risk issues that need to be within this. I'll leave it as read. I'll take it as read, but as open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Patricia. Jamie?
Just to comment on that, this is just a snapshot of the Q4 performance. It is not to be taken as a draft in a report. We're still working on these numbers because of the change in finance systems. We're having to have a bit more detail than digging into the background just to make sure the numbers are right. So the draft is currently showing a operational surplus of 4.9 million. We do expect that to come back to about break even. And the capital program was in line with what we had forecast during the LTP process for last year. Any questions?
Thank you, Jamie. I noticed the good accountant conservatism and caution, so well received, and I've seen it through the paper, so well done. So look, folk, can I open it up for questions? I have a couple, but I wonder if colleagues, you have some first.
Just the one, Bruce.
Yes, Noe?
Just in relation to recommendation 2 that Jamie's just talked about, that on at this point we're showing a surplus of 4.9, and we may very well come back to a break-even position. 2 issues within that, I guess. One, when will we know what the true position is at the end of the year? And it is, I guess, a little bit concerning that we have potentially a 5% variance in our reporting system that needs to be drilled down on. The end of quarter report has potentially that 5% variance, and that's significant on $100 million.
Okay, in terms of when we expect to have a better number, there is another paper in Public Excluded regarding the annual report. This is still subject to audit, and it will be much later this year. We're looking at around November, December, when the auditors will actually be in the building. I would expect that within the next 4 weeks, we will have that as a much better number, and we'll be able to give councillors an update of where we see the draft annual report being at. And in relation to councillor, your question about this is unusual, I do agree, it is unusual, and I would expect going forward that this would not happen again. We'd have a much better number closer to the year end.
Thank you.
At the risk I haven't read my paper properly, Patricia, what zero?
Can you repeat that again? Sorry.
What are the matters that you have got to confirm yet before you can tell us what the surplus number is?
We're just going through the year-end accruals, making sure that we have got the timing cut off correct, and confirming doubtful debt positions. Those are probably the 2 biggest. Jamie, was there anything else that I've missed?
Yeah, there's also the 3 water stimulus money and shovel ready money. We need to work out how much of that revenue to recognise this financial year and how much needs to be put as the liability on the balance sheet.
Right.
Just chipping in there, Chair. Sorry, video's not working. Just wanted to highlight that probably about 90% of that variance is in relation to those last two items. And this is an unusual position from that perspective. So revenue recognition is quite a large item.
Got you. Appreciate that, Michael and Jamie and Patricia. That's great. Any other questions from folk? Thank you for yours, Nobby. Just from you've covered off one, which is actually the numbers moving quite substantially, and thank you for explaining why that's the case. I did notice, and it's not a large number, but I did notice the lower employee expenses reflecting a vacancy, and we can play numbers and work out how many staff that might be over the course of the year. I just wondered whether there was any impact of not being able to fill our vacancies in terms of our service delivery. I wonder if somebody is able to give me some advice on that. It's one thing to have money back in the bank because we had a vacancy factor, but we need to spend the money to be able to do things. So are there things we haven't been able to do? Or do we have parts of the organisation under stress?
I'm wondering whether Rhiannon, can you answer that one from what you've seen to date in collecting the KPI information?
Bruce, I wonder whether it's more appropriate for me to respond to that. Patricia's asked the question in relation to KPIs. I think each of the group managers would acknowledge that there have been areas under stress as a result of an inability to fill vacancies. Michael could certainly tell you about some of the areas in finance and assurance where he hasn't been able to make the progress that he might have liked. Similarly, Erin has had areas where we've managed, but we've been squeaking in rather than being able to do it with the level of assurance that we'd really like to. Steve's been very fortunate in managing to recruit third-tier managers into his area, but beneath that, I know there are areas, for instance, in the museum, where there are some skills that we are currently lacking. And similarly, Trudy's area, I think we've been, again, squeaking in as opposed to really being able to meet our KPIs comfortably.
Look, and I think that's something to keep in a reflection as we go through it. Claire, thank you for that update. I suspect that it was probably across the organisation, but Bruce, it does reflect.
Just as a follow-up to that.
Yep, sure, mate.
Probably 12 months ago, I raised the issue of us as councillors not having a true handle on salaries, and the wider costs that sit within those what it was referred to as personnel costs, which are beyond just salaries, of course. And that one line is 25% of our annual operating costs. And I know I've had some opposition to this before, but I think it would be helpful going forward to have, as part of a quarterly update or even a 6-monthly update, just a breakdown of what Claire's just finished telling us, so that we can see where those vacancies are falling and have some understanding of how that impacts on service delivery.
Thank you, Nobby. Can I ask Claire to consider that? I mean, I guess I have some sympathy in one sense, Nobby, that you can see I am relating the financial results to actually what does it mean in terms of performance, just as we do and have in the earlier item between financial performance and capital delivery is actually really important. So thank you, Claire, for that. Appreciate that it is a general stress across it. And I guess when we get to the full annual report and see the KPIs, it'll be interesting to see how that's affected. But of course, as a risk matter, it also worries me that if, as you suggested, there are numbers of parts of the organisation, shall we say, struggling to have a full complement, then raises questions around health, safety and wellbeing. So I appreciate that. Are there any other points people would like to raise at this point for a paper that you're already seeing through the Finance Committee? Any other questions people would like to raise? There being none, I wonder if I can just move to the resolutions then, which Jamie has outlined as just more than just receiving. As we note that firstly, given it's the annual report, it is a quarterly update, not the draft annual report, and that we have year-end accounting adjustments still to be applied, which will lower the current operating surplus towards a break-even performance. And again, I just break in there to reflect Michael's given us a strong lead as to where those key changes are. Council has a draft operating surplus of 4.9 with that point above, and that the capital program spend is in line with forecast. I'll put that motion. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Darren.
Alex.
Oh, I got Darren's hand up first. I was hoping that the chair of finance or whatever it is, strategy policy, whatever you are, Darren, might have said yes.
Absolutely.
I've been worried otherwise. Is there any discussion on the motion? Darren, is there anything you want to say as a seconder? No? I don't think you might be muted, mate, but I think I...
No, sorry. Thanks, Bruce.
Appreciate that. Okay, so I'll put the motions in. All in favour, please say aye.
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 Those against? It's carried. Okay, we have item 12, which is urgent business. I have no indication of urgent business. And if we could move back to the start of the motion, which talks about moving into public excluded, and I just said there were a couple of matters I wanted to raise. Firstly, I think it's important that within this, if I've got it right, we note that we want Jeff and Lindsay to remain, please. But I've had somebody's just tidied up for me the reasons for public exclusion. So I wonder if you go to B, please, on the next page, with the council litigation update, you'll notice a change there. The reason is section 7.2G to protect legal professional privilege. And also under C, where we have the internal audit program update, that the reason is under both 7.2A, which is to protect the privacy of natural persons, etc., and 7.2J, which is to prevent the disclosure or use of official information for improper gain or improper advantage. So those have been clarified for us. So thank you for that, who've done that management. So look, I'd like to move at the stage that we move into public excluded for the reasons stated, and that we also allow Lindsay and Jeff to remain. I'll put that motion, please. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Bruce.
Yeah. Thank you, Darren. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? It's carried. That's brilliant.